It was summer vacation, and as usual, my brother and I were going to spend at least a week at our grandparents' place. Their village was about 60 kilometers from the city in a fairly desolate area with very few people around, so we would mostly spend our time in the large yard, playing or helping them with some chores. At that time, I was 13 years old and my brother was 10. Sometimes when I think back to those times, I'm surprised that even though we stayed there for a week, we never got bored, having plenty of things to explore, like wandering through the nearby fields, playing with the animals in the yard, and many other activities. As for my grandparents, all I can say is that they were extraordinary people. They were very kind to us, even though it might not have been easy to take care of two children full of energy and curiosity, which can sometimes lead to unfortunate incidents, though that wasn't the case in this story. So as I was saying, the first 2 days were filled with activities, just like I mentioned earlier. However, on the third day, something interesting happened. My brother and I were exploring areas of the yard, and we entered a small house which was like a small barn where our grandparents stored all sorts of things, including animal feed. Essentially, the place was used for storage. There was a large wooden door, which we opened, followed by a rather eerie creak, as if forewarning the events that were about to unfold. While we were exploring the room, noticing all sorts of objects that seemed strange to us since we had never seen them before, I heard my brother shout, "Look at this!" I looked over and saw that he was holding a kind of wooden board with numbers and letters on it. It was a Ouija board, but at that time, I had no idea of its existence. And probably even if I did, I wouldn't have believed in such things. However, we were very curious about what it was used for and what those symbols and numbers meant. We found some instructions on how it was supposed to be used, and we realized that a piece was missing. Just then, we thought we heard a whisper from the corner of the room. Being at an age where you might not recognize danger when you see or hear it, we went towards the place where we heard the whisper and found the very object we needed to complete the board. We placed the board on the ground, and then we put that piece with a hole in the middle on the board, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. We picked up the paper with the instructions again, reading more carefully this time, and started following them. My brother and I both placed our hands on that piece of material, moving it over the board from one number to another, through the letters and symbols, without any meaning. We asked if anyone was in the room while continuing to move the piece over the letters, but again, nothing happened. After about 20 minutes of trying to figure out the board's purpose, we got bored and continued our search through the old items left in the barn. However, the fun was about to end when, suddenly, the wooden door slammed shut, locking us inside, with the only light coming from small cracks in the wooden walls. The barn had electricity, but at that moment, due to fear and the very dim light, we couldn't find the switch. It was as if my thoughts had been heard because the light bulb started flickering, behaving very strangely, turning on and off every second. The situation was getting worse, so amidst our screams, the only light bulb in the barn burned out with a short-circuit sound, followed by a small explosion. As fear gripped me more and more, with an overwhelming sense of unease, I felt a slight relief when I noticed the barn door had opened. It was our grandmother. She had heard our shouting and came to check what was wrong. Now, when I think more carefully about this incident, when we explained to our grandmother what had happened, she wasn't very surprised, probably thinking we had exaggerated. But from what I remember, her expression and demeanor changed drastically when she saw the Ouija board in the middle of the room. At the time, I didn't realize it, but she took the board and asked us what we had done with it, telling us never to mess with those things again. I saw that she took the board with her and burned it. I asked her why she did that, and she told me it was an old piece of junk she no longer needed. However, now, at 28 years old, that answer no longer seems very convincing, and it makes me think in a completely different direction. The incident can be viewed from multiple angles, so we could say that the barn door closed because of the wind and the light bulb simply burned out, with fate making these things happen simultaneously. Yes, we could say that the Ouija board played its part, but at the same time, it's not necessarily true. What surprises me, though, is my grandmother's act of immediately discarding and burning the board, out of all the objects in the barn we interacted with. Why that board specifically? Of course, with the information we have today, I understand why she did it, But that would mean that my grandmother certainly believed that what happened was because of a spirit my brother and I summoned. To be honest, I'm not sure if the events had anything to do with our actions with the Ouija board, but my grandmother's reaction certainly made me think. Her change in behavior when she saw the board could be just that of someone who had seen a lot in their life, because the fear in her eyes was clearly visible. And this cannot help but make me believe that there was a considerable possibility we encountered a malevolent spirit. It was a Friday, just a regular summer day. I had just finished school and was heading home with my friends, Kevin and Ethan. As we walked and talked on our way, Kevin brought up an interesting idea. He showed us a picture on his phone of something he had found in his attic, among old and forgotten objects. It was an Ouija board. For context, we were all very interested in the paranormal. Ghosts, haunted houses, spirits, and things like that. Often we would explore abandoned buildings, supposedly haunted houses, forests and cemeteries at midnight because we were curious, and the adrenaline rush from these activities made us feel truly alive. Even though we knew some of these adventures could lead to dangerous situations with potentially unhappy endings, we couldn't resist. The worst things that had happened were being chased by the police or finding all sorts of homeless people sleeping in the abandoned houses. So unfortunately, nothing paranormal as we had hoped. Recently, we had heard a lot about this Ouija board and had been planning to get one to see if anything unusual would happen or if it would just be another hoax. So the plan was set. We would head to Kevin's house around 9 p.m. since his parents were out of town for the weekend. We bought some candles and headed to Kevin's place. Once there, we decided to use the Ouija board in Kevin's room, so we tidied up a bit and brought a table into the middle of the room. The lights were off, the only source of light being the candles we had brought. We placed the Ouija board on the table, and Ethan and I started using it. As we placed our fingers on the planchette and moved it randomly among the letters and numbers, we asked questions like, "Is anyone here?" and "Is there a spirit that wants to talk to us?" But we got no response. After about 20 minutes, during which we took turns trying to see if one of us could catch the interest of a spirit, we started getting bored and thought about giving up. However, just as I said the board was a waste of time, suddenly Kevin's TV turned on by itself. The remote was untouched on the couch, and we were all at the table in the middle of the room. "Okay," I said, "maybe this is a sign." We turned off the TV and continued asking questions, hoping for some results. At one point, when Ethan asked, "Are you here?" I felt the planchette move slightly to the left, towards yes. I looked seriously at Ethan and asked, "Was that you?" As I asked, I could see his expression change. He was about to ask me the same question. He said, "No, I thought it was you." Before we started, we agreed not to play pranks on each other and to be very serious about what we were trying to do. I believed them both when they said they weren't joking, because we had quite a bit of experience together with paranormal adventures in haunted houses and various buildings, and I knew for sure that they wanted to get a real result just as much as I did. So I was pretty sure Ethan hadn't moved the planchette. As our hands moved towards yes, the TV turned on again by itself, this time to a music channel playing a very old song from the 80s or 90s. Kevin got up and unplugged the TV so we wouldn't be disturbed anymore. We continued and asked the spirit, "Are you the one turning on the TV?" I could see the fear on Ethan's face as our hands didn't move away from the answer. "Yes." "Are you a good spirit?" I asked. The fear began to grip us as the planchette moved towards no. Honestly, at that moment, we all wanted to stop because the fear was intensifying, and a feeling of unease seemed to fill the air. It felt like a pressure in my chest, making it harder to breathe. However, curiosity seemed to push us all to continue, to find out more. I asked, "Who are you?" And the planchette started moving again on its own. The first letter it moved to was D, and Kevin was already thinking of people with names starting with D who could be connected to this. The second letter was E, and we began to panic. Yes, you guessed it. The next letters were V, I, L, exactly in that order, spelling out the word devil. At that moment, we jumped up from the table in fear, and the TV turned on again, on the same channel with the volume at maximum. But this shouldn't have been possible since Kevin had unplugged it. We didn't understand what was happening. We were shocked and unprepared. We hadn't expected such a result because even though we liked things related to the paranormal, we had never experienced anything real and were a bit skeptical about this Ouija board attempt. After we got up from the table, we blew out the candles, turned on the lights, and thought about where to throw the board away. There was a small river about 1 kilometer from Kevin's house, and we decided to throw it there and not talk to anyone about what had happened. A few years after this event, whenever we meet and talk, we try to analyze everything that happened that night, every step, every event. It was the first time we felt something real in the paranormal field because Ethan and I always joke that we guided the planchette towards those letters. He says it was me, and I say it was him. The strangest thing, however, if we think about it, was the TV turning on for the 3rd time, even though it was unplugged. From my point of view, this was the clearest indication that something paranormal was present. Anyway, I don't know if it was real or not, but I tend to think it was. According to Kevin, even to this day, 10 years after that event, he still has moments when he feels a certain unease in the house, as if he's being watched by someone.